All right, let's jump right into this explainer on Daniel chapter 1. We're looking at a genuinely incredible piece of history today, how a teenager's absolute, unwavering faith managed to conquer the psychological warfare of an ancient, massive empire. We're going to look closely at the clash between the mighty Babylonians and a small group of Hebrew youths and see exactly how this ancient text remains incredibly relevant to the challenges we navigate today.
Here's our quick roadmap. We'll hit sovereignty in the siege, Babylon's identity erasure strategy, Daniel draws the line, the 10-day test, God's supernatural reward, and finally, faith for modern audiences. We'll journey from the macro-level geopolitical siege of Jerusalem right down to a micro-level dietary test. Starting off with Section 1, Sovereignty in the Siege. We begin in the ancient world, and honestly, this is way more than just a military conquest. The sources show us God is actually using Babylon as a chastening agency for Judah.
Take a look at this timeline. Daniel was actually taken in 605 BC. That's a full 19 years before Jerusalem was completely destroyed. King Nebuchadnezzar took this first wave of hostages, and he didn't just take anyone. He deliberately took the royal and noble seed, the absolute best and brightest young men, dragged back to Babylon as trophies of war to serve the very empire that conquered them. I absolutely love this quote from commentator Charles Spurgeon because it hits on the core theological truth of the whole narrative. Nebuchadnezzar totally thought he was the master of the universe, but God is completely sovereign over human history. Even in Israel's absolute darkest moment, when it felt like everything was literally lost, God was moving the pieces on the board. He's never surprised by the actions of empires.
And you can see that right here in the text of Daniel 1. Notice that absolutely crucial phrase, the Lord gave Jehoiakim into his hand. That is a massive paradigm shift, right? The Babylonians obviously assumed their gods had just completely crushed the God of Israel, but the text proves this exile wasn't God losing control. Actually, scratch that, he was actively orchestrating it, fulfilling prophecies given generations prior because of Israel's broken covenant.
Moving to Section 2. Babylon's identity erasure strategy. Let's look at how this historical context builds into an insidious strategy to totally overwrite these captive youths' worldview.
Because you have to realize, this wasn't just a physical captivity, it was deep psychological warfare. The Babylonians rolled out this highly systematic 3-step reprogramming protocol meant to completely erase these guys' God-given identities over 3 years. Step 1, isolate them from their families. Step 2, totally immerse them in Chaldean literature, science, and the king's rich diet. And step 3, fundamentally alter how they identify themselves by changing their actual names. It's textbook indoctrination. Just look at these names side by side. It is a deliberate spiritual assault. The Hebrew names all have these beautiful references to the true God, El or Yahweh. Like Daniel literally means God is my judge. But look at the replacements. They were renamed to glorify the pagan gods of Babylon, Bel, Aku, and Nebo. Imagine having the very name you answer to, your core identity, changed to honor your captor's God. They wanted them to forget who they were, and more importantly, whose they were.
Which brings us to Section 3, Daniel draws the line. Despite that immense pressure, total isolation, and being just a teenager far from home, Daniel decides to take a massive stand.
The text tells us that Daniel resolved or purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. This is absolutely crucial. True character is making up your mind to be holy and setting it upon your heart long before the crisis actually hits. This wasn't some impulsive, panicked reaction or a sudden mood swing. It was a deeply prepared commitment that made a terrifying, high-stakes crisis manageable.
Notice the incredible wisdom here in what Daniel accepted versus what he rejected. He accepted the secular education. He even accepted the new pagan name because, well, those things couldn't change his soul. He knew who he truly was, even if they called him Belteshazzar. But he absolutely refused to defile himself with a lifestyle that compromised God's word. The king's food was his line in the sand. He'd learn their language, for sure, but there was no way he was going to digest their morality.
On to Section 4, the 10-day test. This is a super pivotal moment. How do you push back against the most powerful king on earth without, losing your head? Daniel makes this brilliant, incredibly measured proposal. Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed by you. He didn't throw a fit, he didn't start a protest, he just respectfully offered a test that relied entirely on God to show the results. Now, you might be wondering,
And it's a completely fair question. Why on earth would a 14-year-old captive risk the king's fiery wrath over a dietary choice? I mean, what teenager turns down a royal feast? Why not just eat the meat, blend in, and survive? Well, because eating that lavish food wasn't just about breaking Jewish kosher laws. That meat was likely sacrificed to Babylonian idols. Eating it meant entering into fellowship with Babylon's whole cultural and spiritual system. It meant stepping off holy ground and acknowledging their gods. Daniel chose the simple food of the poor, vegetables and water, so that his reliance would be 100% on the God of Israel. Zero question about who was sustaining him. Section 5. God's supernatural reward. The 10-day test concludes, and the results are honestly stunning. We immediately see that when you give yourself to God beyond reasonable service, He provides an unusual blessing. The result of that obedience really comes down to the number 10. God honored their obedience so immensely that after graduating from this 3-year program, King Nebuchadnezzar interviewed them, and he found these 4 youths 10 times better in wisdom and understanding than all the magicians and scholars in his entire realm. 10 times. And here's another key number, 3. After 3 grueling years of systematic Chaldean indoctrination, Daniel and his friends emerged completely untainted. They basically proved that a deep inner conviction can overcome absolutely any outer pressure an empire can throw at you. Babylon got into their heads with education, but it never ever got into their hearts. The really crucial point here is that God didn't remove them from Babylon. Instead, He blessed them right in the middle of it. He gave them supernatural intelligence, skill, and to Daniel specifically, prophetic gifts to understand visions and dreams, stuff no pagan education could ever manufacture. These were gifts that would end up shaping world history for centuries to come.
Finally, Section 6, Faith for Modern Audiences. So how does a 2,600-year-old story about Babylonian captivity actually apply to us navigating today's turbulent culture?
Well, society today still uses Babylon's playbook. Culture is constantly trying to reshape our identity, re-educate our values, and tempt us with the comfort of just blending in. But Daniel shows us that God is completely sovereign over the hard situations we don't choose. Uncompromising faith, deciding to be holy before the pressure even arrives, will always be recognized and blessed by a sovereign God. Conformity might offer temporary comfort, for sure, but obedience brings lasting, God-given rewards. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Daniel made his decision before the pressure ever came. So ask yourself, what are the areas in your life where you need to resolve ahead of time before the temptation is standing right in front of you? Thanks so much for joining me as we explore this incredible ancient text. Until next time, keep seeking to understand.